Welcome to Thinking Thursday. This week, we celebrate Juneteenth. As Juneteenth has recently become a holiday, a national holiday, we are going to look at what does that mean for us now? How do we celebrate? What do we think about it? How does this impact our how does it impact us? How does it impact our lives? Just what does it mean? That is what we will be looking at tonight. This thing called Juneteenth. It's been a part of my life forever, being from Texas. And those of you who may not be from here, it's a new thing, and we figure out what do you do with it. But tonight, it's all things Juneteenth. But as always, we want to start off with a few deep breaths because I think it's important to start off with our deep breathing just so that we can figure out where we are from the end of what may have been a crazy day. And I can tell you for me, it's not been a crazy day, it's been a crazy week. But I'm thankful to have seen it through. I'm thankful to be here to experience crazy because the alternative is that I'm not here at all. So, although it is a hectic week, a crazy week, one that yeah, you can move on and end. I'm thankful that it's here. So we're going to start off with a few deep breaths as we always do. So, take in a deep breath and slowly let it out. And I'll count you in as I usually do. So let me go back. I want you to breathe in, 2, 3, 4, and out. 2, 3, 4. Breathe in, 2, 3, 4, and out. 2, 3, 4. Breathe in, 2, 3, 4, and out. 2, 3, 4. Those of you who may not have been with us before, let me tell you why we do the deep breathing. We do the deep breathing because it allows you an opportunity to take in more oxygen to your body, putting more oxygen in your brain, more oxygen flowing through your blood flow, allowing your body to calm down. And I want to remind you that any given time in your life when you're feeling a little stressed, take time to take some deep breaths, deep cleansing breaths, and allow yourself a chance to have that woosah moment. So, hopefully, if there were cares and concerns of your day, taking a few deep breaths has allowed you to relax for a moment. Well, tonight we will be talking about Juneteenth. Should we celebrate it? Just what is it? Why is it important? So let's dig right into it. Juneteenth is celebrated initially in Texas because that is the day, 2.5 years after slaves were free, that we found out in Texas. General Granger read General Order number 3 in Texas, and then the slaves in Texas were free. And many of us know that okay, he read General Order number 3, but how many of you have actually read it yourself or know what it says? So I wanted to read to you what General Granger read on that day. The people of Texas are informed that in accordance to a proclamation from the executive of the United States all slaves are free. This involves an absolute equality of persons' rights and rights of property between former masters and slaves, and the connection heretofore existing between them becomes that between employer and hired labor. The freedmen are advised to remain at their present homes and work for wages. They are informed that they will not be allowed to collect at military posts and that they will not be supported in idleness either there or elsewhere. And we're going to come back to this and look at what that's really saying. It's staggering when you read it and you see that yes, the slaves were free, but even in this thing, there were limits put on them. Since we're talking about Juneteenth and it is related to slavery in Texas, I wanted to bring you up to speed on some interesting facts I found out about slavery and the Alamo. And others I've talked to were not aware of it either until recently. In Texas, we are great for revisionist history. And if you look just past the surface, the truth is there. It will not be taught in history books in official channels, but just a slight search, you can find out more about real history in Texas. So, when it comes to slavery, what's the real deal? What's really going on in Texas as it relates to slavery? Well, what you might not know is one of the biggest issues in the United States, Texas, Mexico debate was slavery. Are we going to allow slavery? Mexico was not in favor of slavery. Well, we know the United States was, and we know that Texas was. So, Texas, being a slave state, maintain their Texas, wanted to maintain their slaves. And, there was this battle going between would Texas be part of Mexico? Would Texas be its own state? Would Texas be part of the United States? Just to throw this in, Texas has been such a entity. We know about Six Flags Over Texas, but younger people may not know that Texas, there really were six different flags that Texas flew under, meaning it had six different entities that it belonged to. Initially, Texas was part of Spain. What is now Texas was part of Spain from the 1500s to the 1600s, and again from 1690 to 1821. But from 1685 to 1690, Texas was part of France. Then Mexico owned Texas, this land, from 1821 to 1836. Then it was its own republic from 1836 to 1845. But in the middle of that, from 1861 to 1865, it was part of the Confederate States of America. Then in the middle of that, 1845 to 1861, it was part of the United States. Then again, in 1865 to now, Texas has been part of the United States. So Texas has had its own history of doing what it wants and other people wanting this land. But in its early days, slavery was very much a part of it, and slavery was very much a part of it going back and forth in hand. So Mexico did not want slaves. And we know about the Alamo, and they came in and they defeated those Texans. They won the battle, but a short time later, the war was lost, and Mexico lost the land of Texas. But it's gone back and forth. But one of the issues they were fighting over was the right to have slaves. If it was going to be a part of Mexico, it wasn't going to be able to keep the slaves. It was going to be its own independent entity. It could do whatever it wanted, and slaves were going to be very much going to be a part of it. And as most things, it goes back to money. The slaves brought in lots of money with their crops and their free labor. So they were not willing to give that up. So when we Think about the Alamo. I challenge you to go back, study the Alamo, and just study the role that slavery played in the Alamo. So, as we're looking at Juneteenth, we're just looking at some of the things that surrounded slavery and just in Texas, which really impacts the United States. There are some that don't want to look at slavery, but I will tell you why I believe that we should continue to study slavery. We are more than enslaved people in America. And our history did not begin with enslavement in the Americas. However, we cannot omit that part of our history. We can't just cut it out as if it doesn't exist, even though that's what Texas history books may say. It's a part of what made Texas Texas. If we When we begin to look at those Six Flags and those times that Texas changed ruler ownership over six different times from the 1500 to now, slavery was very much a part of that. So when we take that out, we're taking out real history, where it's not just black history, it's not slave history, it's history. And we are a part of this country, and our history is a part of this country. So let's get rid of some of this revisionist history and realize it's real. Um, when we look at I want to go back to now that general order of what it said. Just had to drop that bit of knowledge about slavery history. Um, in General Order number 3, General Granger stated that all slaves are free. Yeah, they were free, but there's a but to it. And it said that the relationship between former masters and slave and the connection theretofore existing between them becomes that of employer and hired labor. Well, if I pay you $10 and I charge you $15 and I pay you $10, I allow you to farm on the land, but you have to give me um 50% of what you grow, and I charge you $15 to live there, and I'm only paying you $10, you will forever be indebted to me. And those are made up numbers, but that was as part of the idea behind what happened after slavery. So you weren't free. Sharecroppers and things like that, you were not allowed to really be free. The last part of that statement says the freedmen are advised to remain at their present homes. It wasn't a home. You were enslaved and on a plantation, but they were advised to remain at their present homes and work for wages. And I just told you how the wages went. They were informed that they will not be allowed to collect at military posts and that they will not be supported in idleness either there or elsewhere. What's important about that and the military posts? Let me explain that. Um, the enslaved did fight in the Civil War, and they did in fight, obviously, most, on the side of the North. Now, if you can fight and not be able to collect, meaning monetary gain, so you're still being enslaved. You can go and fight and you can be a soldier, and that is your job, and you're not going to be compensated monetarily. You're still somewhat enslaved. When you look at the slave codes and the black codes that happened right after slavery and talked about that they will not be supported in idleness, either there or elsewhere, that idleness meant you could, if you were a former enslaved individual walking down the street, that could be considered idleness. And you could be thus arrested and imprisoned and forced to work as free labor. What? Enslaved again because you were idle. Wow. So it's really interesting when I read through this general order number 3. Yes, slaves were free. The enslaved got their freedom, but how free were they? Just in looking back at that time, I found an article from a Galveston newspaper that was written January 2nd, 1866. It said the colored people of Galveston celebrated their emancipation from slavery yesterday by a procession. Notwithstanding the storm, some 800 to 1,000 men, women, and children took part in the demonstration. The procession was orderly and credible to those participating in it. A meeting was held at a colored church on Broadway, and it's presently called the Reedy Chapel, at which addresses were delivered by a number of speakers, among them whom was General Gregory, an assistant commissioner of freemen. The general gave a great deal of good The general gave them a great deal of good, plain advice, which if they follow will redound to their own well-being and prosperity. The Emancipation Proclamation of President Lincoln was read. The singing of John Brown's Body Lies Moldering in the Ground was a part of the program. As far as we observed, there was no interference nor any improper conduct of the spectators. Just letting you know that celebrations of the emancipation in Texas began immediately. It may have been late, but see, here in Texas, no matter what, we know how to celebrate. We know how to do what we have to do. So, so the celebrations went on and on and on, and we were able to celebrate. Just dropping a little Houston history in because I can't help it, because Houston is my hometown and it's so close to Galveston, just up the road. I have to drop this in. Um, in Houston, Juneteenth has been celebrated, since the beginning as well. And there is a park in Houston, Emancipation Park. I want to give you a little of that history. And this is an article about Emancipation Park, sparked by the desire to have a place to commemorate the anniversary of their emancipation, Juneteenth. The community members, all former slaves in the Third Ward and Fourth Ward, led by Reverend Jack Yates, Reverend Richard Allen, Reverend Brock, and Reverend Elias Dibble, united to raise $1,000 in 1872 to purchase 10 acres of a park land to host Juneteenth celebration. This is significant not only as a ritual of remembrance and celebration, but also as an early act of exercising the new right of property ownership. Now let's think about that. $1,000 in 1872. I forgot to look up what that is equivalent to today, but I will tell you it's phenomenal. And these were former slaves who were pastors and people in the community that got together and raised $1,000 to buy land when they were younger couldn't, because if they were former slaves, when they were children, buying land was unheard of. Buying land was something they couldn't do. Um, Amazing. They could stop and get $1,000 and buy land. And that park still exists today. The city of Houston bought it in 2018, but the park Emancipation, that property is still there today. What a powerful situation that we could do something like that. Now, I speak about what happened in Houston because that's home. But all across Texas, there were places that were dedicated and people who did things to commemorate this. We may have been 2.5 years late, but we knew as a people in Texas the importance of celebrating Juneteenth. And now Juneteenth has come to represent the end of slavery, period, not just because it was 2.5 years late in Texas, but because it is a date that is chosen to represent a turning of the tide, a changing of things, and slavery ending. It is not a new thing. We're going to come back some more about Juneteenth, but I want to drop a little more knowledge. I've been looking at, and this was something I found out a little while ago about watermelon. Why watermelon? Because one of the things when you talk about Juneteenth and celebrating, it talks about red soda, it talks about watermelon, it talks about all these other things, and some have become negative. But if we look at why are watermelons considered negative? Right after slavery, and during the time when early emancipation, when blacks were able to sell and make money, one of the things they could do was, they knew we knew how to grow, and we could grow a crop. That's why they didn't want slavery to end. We grew, we did all the work, and they got the money for it. So um, they were making a tremendous amount of money selling watermelon, not just to black people, but to anyone, white, black, anyone who wanted to eat it. It was a crop that they were very adept. Some of your former enslaved were very adept at growing. Um, and so they were making lots of money and gaining wealth. Well, if you know anything about Black Wall Street and how that's one example of when blacks made money, things changed and they wanted, things changed and, we got to take over. Y'all making way too much money. That was what happened with the watermelon. Blacks were gaining a lot of money. Um, blacks were gaining a lot of money selling watermelon. So we need to discredit it and make watermelon look bad, make you not want to eat it. So you begin to see pictures depicted of blacks in blackface. And when I say blackface, literally the color black with big red lips, big eyes, eating watermelon. The stereotype that people who ate watermelon were negative. They were lazy, you were shiftless, you were this. All of these began to be associated with watermelon. And so if you're eating watermelon and you're black, this is you. Now it didn't, those same stereotypes didn't apply to white people who ate watermelon. You weren't seeing those images, you were only seeing the images of black people eating watermelon and it looking negative to them. Wow, really? That's what happened. It became a very negative thing for us to eat it. And to this day, watermelon still has a negative stigma. Some people will not eat it. Some will eat it, but they don't want to eat it in public. And I've heard people say this, they're not going to eat it in public because, oh no, or I just don't like it. And it's okay not to like it. It's a food. You don't have to like every food. But to be in a position where the negative connotation of it makes you not want it because it makes you less than because you're black and eating it. So when you hear someone make negative comments about black people and watermelon, understand that stigma is because we were making money selling watermelon and it was a big industry and we were the ones who knew how to grow it. It was something they were not, others were not adept at growing. So it was a way to discredit and stop the wealth. Another way to stop our wealth. Wow. So next time you feel ashamed about eating watermelon, just remember it is nothing to be ashamed of. It is something our people ate and ate it proudly and grew proudly and made money from it. So, hmm. Let's reclaim it. Go buy you some watermelon, eat it and enjoy it, and know that it exists here in this country because your ancestors grew it, produced it, and at one time were able to enjoy it. Take it back, enjoy it. Just looking at some of the stereotypes and I chose to look at these because as we think about Juneteenth, I want to just look at it's kind of a hodgepodge tonight of all things related to Juneteenth, things we might not think about, such as the watermelon, such as why people don't want to celebrate it. So I wanted to hit on that for a moment. I can remember growing up when it being debated, talking to some people who felt this is before it was a holiday in Texas. Some people feeling like it should be some people feeling like it shouldn't be. So I wanted to just throw out some of those both sides to you. So for some people, the idea of Juneteenth being a holiday was just horrific. Why in the world would you want to celebrate that in Texas we're so backwards? And this is what I remember someone actually saying: we're so backwards that it took us 2.5 years to figure out we were free. That particular statement has some flaws in it. The slaves weren't backwards. Those who were enslaved and had no knowledge of what was going on. They had no way of saying, hey, by the way, we're free. Come on, let it make it official. Mm. Um, what happened? There are many stories about why it took so long. I believe the ones that are more economic, that deal with economics. One is that when people were coming to bring the news to Texas, they were either killed before the news got here, killed once they got here with the news so that they couldn't deliver the news. Another was that the once the news got here, rather than making it official, it was held so that the slave owners could have another year of crops coming in. They can plant, bring in the crops. Let's take it one more year. It was again about economics. So anyone coming to bring that news may have been killed, may have not been killed, but the news didn't get here and they were stopped from bringing it, and the landowners were able to get some more crops in, a chance to make more money. So I do believe that it was about money. Why did it take so long? They were able to get more crops. I want my money, and you being free is going to get rid of my money. So, hmm, who's to say what really happened? I just know it's interesting that it took that long. Some of the other things about the other side would be those who thought it should be commemorated, or those who felt like it is a part of our history, which is what I said earlier. We need to celebrate our history because it is our history, and we should not at any time negate parts of our history just because they're ugly. And even if that history is in Texas, it took us this long to find out that the enslaved were free. As I said, the enslaved had no control over when the news of freedom came. So whatever that reason is, it's still our history. All of our history isn't pretty. So just because we found out later, that doesn't mean it's a pretty history, but it is our history. So we celebrate it either way. Um, there are those who say, and I'm one of them, I'm happy that it is a national holiday because I do say that we have to hold on to that part of our history so we understand it's real, because I don't see our history of being enslaved as a negative thing. I see it as shows how strong we are. When you study slavery from the Middle Passage over here into Texas, we are strong people to have withstood all of that. So, wow, really? It's not a negative thing. I am one of those probably glass half full people. I'm going to find the positive in it. So the positive in Juneteenth is that we can look at what we've come through and see how strong we are. When we think about people saying, as Black people, we don't work together, we don't do this, we don't do that. We have a history of working together. I told you about Emancipation Park in Houston, where those four ministers got together, those four Black men got together with their congregation, with their friends, with their supporters, and raised $1,000. And somebody let me know that it is like $20 million today. That's what $1,000 is equivalent to. Now, if it could happen then, it can happen now. We have a history of being able to work together. If we didn't, this is an aside, but if we didn't work together then, and didn't work together throughout Jim Crow, throughout the civil rights, and really still now working together, we wouldn't be where we are. We do work together. We do need to support each other more, but it exists. We have a history of working together, and we want to build on that. Back to knowing our history, we want to build on that history as opposed to other things that may have existed for us. So, yes, it is important to know. So, when you look at the two sides of do we celebrate our history or do we not? It is our history. We won't deny it. We have to celebrate it. We work in it, we walk in it, we do what we have to do because it's us. So what do we do with that? What do we do with it now? How do we move on? What do we do? What do we tell our children? Throughout Texas, there will be lots of celebrations this weekend with Juneteenth. Celebrate them. Take some time with your family and talk about what it means to you. If you disagree with Juneteenth being celebrated, take time and talk to your family about that. If they agree and you disagree, have a discussion. But know your history and study your history. If you feel that we can't talk about slavery, examine why. Not talking about it will not change the history. Understanding it can let you know just how strong we are as a people. It can help you see what we've come through. It can help you see how much we've done. As I said, just studying the watermelon and knowing that when we look at just the watermelon itself, and it was a symbol used against us because we were making money selling it. So it was really a symbol of oppression by former slave owners as opposed to a symbol of our shiftlessness, which is what it was perpetuated to be. Um, another thing to do is to just think about use it as a time to study our history. We are more than the descendants of the former enslaved. We are descendants from kings and queens in Africa. Take this time of Juneteenth to expand your knowledge of our people throughout the diaspora. We are everywhere. And a part of us being everywhere does have to do with slavery, how those slave ships took us all and dropped us all over the world. But how did we thrive? Take time to know how we got certain places. A quick story I will tell you of slavery in Texas and freedom. You know that slaves escaped to Canada with Harriet Tubman and some on their own. They escaped to Canada for freedom. Now, if you were in Texas and you had a chance to walk to Mexico or walk to Canada for your freedom, where would you go? Probably Mexico. It was closer. And as we discovered, Texas was Mexico. It was not Mexico. It was Spain. It was all this other. But going deep into Mexico was a lot closer to your freedom in Texas than it was going to Canada. Well, we have always been a creative people. And those of you who may know that we made quilts, quilts tell a story. There are different patterns on quilts that tell stories. During the time of slavery, there were whites, Germans and other whites, who helped slaves escape. One of the ways they helped them escape was there might be a quilt laying on the line like it was there to dry. If that quilt was laying out there, you knew this was a safe house and you could go to the safe house and get you some more clothes and get rid of the slave clothes. And that was on your way to freedom as you may have been escaping to Mexico. It is true that sometimes the slaves would sing songs and the slave master singing, oh, they just so happy down there singing. They're singing songs of freedom. They're singing songs to help them escape. So when you might say, swing low, sweet chariot, coming forth to carry me home. Swing low, sweet chariot, coming forth to carry me home. That might mean it's time to escape. That chariot is coming and we're leaving tonight. We're getting on that train. The chariot might have been your own feet, but it was a symbol to say it was a sense of travel and we are leaving. Wade in the water might mean it's time we will be at the water tonight and we're leaving. And if you're in the water, the dogs that they're going to send to track you, you're going to lose your scent in the water. So they might sing, Wade in the water, wade in the water, children, wade in the water. God's gonna trouble the water. And when you got to that line between that river, the Rio Grande, between Texas and Mexico, you got on the other side, you were free. So you were happy to wade in that water and get your freedom. So all of this happened as they escaped to Mexico. And back to the quilts, they had the symbols on the quilts, and you would know this was a safe place. But there were so many secret codes and messages the slaves used to escape and get their freedom. So in Texas, many would escape to Mexico, and they would escape deep into Mexico. Now remember, I told you that Texas has been part of Mexico and not part of Mexico, and the whole slavery was part of that debate and that fight. So if you were going to get your freedom, you weren't going to stop right here at the border. You were going to go deep into Mexico. And there are still towns. And that is why even you see in Mexican culture, you see some are very dark. They're descendants of those slaves that escaped into Mexico to find their freedom. It's so much we need to know about our freedom and our freedom in um, Mexico. I mean, our freedom in Texas and what it did. So use this time of Juneteenth as a way to just learn about history. Every state has its own history. You know, all states who were there, southern states have their slavery history. And don't think that the North was a mecca for Black people. Racism existed there too. They did not practice slavery, but just because it was a free state doesn't mean that all of was great. Um, so take this time. Use Juneteenth as a time to say, I'm going to learn about history. Going to let those who know me, know about my history. I am going to learn a lot. Here in Texas, if you saw the signing of the bill today with President Biden, you saw Opal Lee, who is a Fort Worth native who has fought to make Juneteenth a holiday. You can look her up. CNN has done something on her. You can look up the local stations in the Dallas area and see about her. She was passionate about this. And for her, this is a dream come true. And it's not just about celebrating slavery, it is about holding on to our history. And when in a state like Texas, where we're trying to wipe out history and have this revisionist history where everything was hunky dory, now it's time to do it. So I challenge you to find out about some of the other things associated with it. It is amazing. There will be several things going on this weekend, several programs that, let's see if I can make you aware of some of them. Um, that are going on. If Sister Mama Sonia can put in the comments again about her Zoom program, I will announce that. Um, Let me tell you my call to action. Our call to action is this: know your history, know the history of the enslaved and the free Africans in America. It is a powerful history. Know it. Live it. Don't be ashamed of it. Just like you don't need to be ashamed of eating watermelon because it was a symbol of our wealth. But if you don't know your history, we see the negative stereotypes and don't understand, and we fall prey to them. As I say every week, be politically aware and vote in every election. Every election impacts your life. Every election impacts your life. So be aware of every election. Why? Whether it's dog catcher, land commissioner, mayor, president, They have the ability to enact laws and make changes that can impact your life. So be politically aware. We are in a very divisive state right now. Um, the same day that the Juneteenth bill was put into action in Texas, it was signed that anyone can carry guns. Even police are opposed to this. You can carry guns without a permit. I've heard of some NRA people saying this is not what we're all about. You've gone too far. Um, Also in Texas, an anti-Semitic bill was signed today about, and I'm not opposed to that. But it's interesting. These are the things we're signing today, the same day that the Juneteenth bill was signed. It's just something to make you say, hmm. So be politically aware. Know what's going on. Take time to make a difference in your community with our people. It doesn't have to be something large to make a difference. Maybe you just take this information, this teeny bit of information, and let it grow in you and share it with us, others. And lastly, when possible, buy black. Why? We need to support each other. Support local black businesses. If you know of one, share it with others. If it's a restaurant, if it's a bookstore, if it's a convenience store, if it's a hair care store. And sometimes, yes, when I think of the hair care store, you may have to pay a little more. When it comes to the hair care, because there are markets that larger stores, and typically in this country, your Asian owned stores can get things at a different rate than your black vendors can. So support our own. When you support our own, you're helping yourself. This Saturday at 2 o'clock p.m. there is a Juneteenth poetry celebration, and the Zoom ID I will post on my page. The cast ranges from ages 5 to 89. So see what they have to say about Juneteenth. Um, Rather than read the Zoom ID, I'll post it later on and you can see it. For those of you who see this after the fact, I will try to post it on my YouTube page and on my Facebook page so you can see what this cast with a wide age range has done. So I always like to end by reminding you mental health is health. It is a Western construct that our physical, mental, and spiritual health are different. Anything that impacts us impacts our mental health. As we look at Juneteenth and look at where we've come from as a people, that impacts our mental health. It shows to our strength. As we look at what's going on in this country and how racism is still being perpetuated, that definitely impacts our mental health. So, mental health is health, and let's take care of our mental health. I am Bronwyn Lucas with Able Counseling and Consulting, where we affirm, build, lead, and empower you. If you are ever in need of help with your mental health, reach out, give me a call, 682 3949. I am here to help you. So, thank you for listening in to um, Thinking Thursday, and I look forward to seeing you again next week. Have a great, powerful week and happy